we should get going, because otherwise it's not fair on the people who are here on time.
That's great. Okay. Well, we've got the pleasure of welcoming Rachel Gavin to join us today, independent social worker. I know that Karen it was Karen who put me in touch with Rachel after some work that Rachel had done with Franco, Karen and Tony's son. Karen, would you like to say a little bit before we start?
Yeah, sure. Myself and Tony had the pleasure of meeting Rachel, who has done a recent report for Franco. Rachel is a leading independent social worker in the country. She has more than a couple of decades of experience and has worked extensively in this area. She's got incredible and significant experience of evidence giving at the tribunal, and is very passionate about preparation for adulthood. And she has a recent publication that's, I think, now out with Professor Lee Clements at Leeds University. And I asked Rachel to come and speak to the family forum because I know how important evidence regarding social care has been for us as a family in getting support for Franco in the holidays. And that is all nicely coming together now in respect of kind of his growing independence. So that's why I asked Rachel, and I'm delighted that you made the time to come and join us this evening.
No problem at all. It was a lovely introduction, Karen. Thank you. So I've been independent social worker now for probably about 5 years, but I've worked in social care for 25 years. So it's been a long journey. So I've always worked with neurodivergent young people and adults as well. So it's quite a different role, independent role, to a statutory social worker in a local authority. That's where I would have started. So about 8 years as a local authority social worker. Oh, sorry. And yeah, been independent for the last few years now. So a big part of my role is quite different to perhaps a statutory social worker now. So act as an expert witness in social care. And my job is essentially to support young people and adults, in particular, as Karen noted, regarding transition to adulthood. It's a very tricky time for our young people, isn't it? And it's a scary time for us parent carers as well. And it's probably one of the most scariest times, really, in what's going to happen. And it's something we probably don't stop thinking about, really, especially as years to come, essentially. So a big part of my role is, in terms of what social care is, it's quite a hard area to define, because it's such a big area of work. So at its most basic, our role is to support young people and families who are facing life challenges, essentially. But all social workers would specialise in different areas. But as I say, I've worked in the same area for a very long time now, and it's what I know best. In terms of, I do a lot of work independently for supporting families where it can be quite tricky in terms of finding the right provision. And obviously I've met Franco, who's doing absolutely amazing. And that makes everything worthwhile, and dealing with a very challenging role, to see. That's all we want, really, is to see our young people thriving, isn't it? So that's a very summarized overview of what I actually do. So essentially my role is to make sure that happens. It's become more challenging as a system generally to meet our needs of our young people. And that is essentially why myself and other people in a similar role in independent social work exist, because I think it's becoming more challenging by the day for the right provisions for our young people as well. And not only that, a big part of my role would be that we struggled with understanding of our young people's needs, as young people with disabilities. I come with both professional experience and personal experience, and I think that is something that really, really helps me, and sort of what led me to working as a social worker many years ago in the first place. So it's helpful in a way to have both areas of understanding, if that makes sense. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions or anything I can answer more precisely, I'm more than happy to.
I wondered, Rachel, whether you could just start off by telling or explaining the kind of the duty for a kind of a social care assessment under section 17, because I think that many parents don't know that actually that section 17 right for an assessment actually exists. So I wonder whether that would be kind of a really good place to start.
Definitely. Okay. Yeah. So a section 17 is for a child or young person with a disability, you're entitled to an assessment of the young person's needs. And within that, that is also about the carer's needs as well and the family's needs. So that is very much part of that assessment. It's a huge piece of legislation, and it's something that it's a shame in a sense as well, because as a parent carer, if you didn't know about it, you may not find out about it very easily, but it's actually a statutory right. It's a right for families to be able to request an assessment of need, which it comes under the section 17. And what that looks at is it's quite a wide area. So even though it's social care, our legislation, we have to look at education, health, and social care. So we look at the wider picture as well, and we bring that together. Well, that's what's supposed to happen. We do see more recently, really, that as sort of resources get tighter, essentially in local authorities, it's perhaps not looked at as it should. And again, that's where the sort of the support is more often needed for families. And then for transition, that is again is a key piece element of section 17 is looking at that transition to adulthood as well. So around the age of probably around 16. We should start it at 14, but we don't often see that. The legislation does say we should start looking at it at 14, but we see local authorities tend to look at it a bit later. So what that is looking at is if you a young person, you look at the here and now, but what families are needing is to look at the here and now, but look at the direction and the journey, and social workers should be assessing that as well in terms of where we want to get to with the young person and what support they'll need to get there. So every family, every young person, and every parent carer with a young person with a disability is entitled to ask for an assessment under section 17. And that's up until 18. And then a different piece of legislation comes in then, and that's called, in England, that's the Care Act. And that again is something that is for adult assessments, but that again should start a little bit earlier. So if your young person's coming under children's services, then their needs need to be assessed again at around the age of 17. So it's good to keep these ages in your mind, because that's what should be happening. And obviously that doesn't always happen. In thinking about that young person's needs in terms of meeting the Care Act legislation, 18 onwards, and then that pre-planning is supposed to start. So one of my major concerns at the moment is that pre-planning often isn't started early enough. So that's a basic overview of the legislation itself in England. And then there's other elements of the education system in terms of policy and sort of legislation, really, that we also need to consider. So we're thinking of the wider picture and assessments as well. So the remit of social care is to bring all those aspects of a young person's life together. And that, as I say, is education, health, and social care as well, into care planning and support planning. So I hope that explains.
Can I ask another question, Chris? Because I've just got kind of 2 or 3 to kind of start off as a bit of a framing, if that's okay. Rachel, I know that many send parents who've had a really, really awful time with local
Mhm.
authorities, maybe almost reluctant to kind of come to go and ask for a Section 17 assessment, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
fear around what local authorities can do. And I know that you are very experienced in the space of fabricated induced illness. And so I wonder kind of what tips you could give to parents about requesting that Section 17 assessment, and actually, how you can maybe get over that initial reluctance to invite the local authority into our lives.
Yeah, it's one of the most challenging areas, and probably a lot of families are quite nervous about approaching local authority, but any local authority really. And that's often there is a concern generally that, not all, but understanding a young person's needs. For example, a young person who's autistic and lots of challenges and sensory needs and things as well. We often find that unless you've worked a long time in that area and you're very experienced, it's tricky, and needs are not always understood or misinterpreted. So that can be tricky. But at the same time, you could have a very good experience with a local authority, and I say it's postcode lottery, to be honest. But in terms of approaching a local authority, in terms of your preparation, it would be trying to, I would write it all down first and trying to help that person, because we've got to remember they come, it'll feel like it's a professional coming to your home to do an assessment. It's very personal as well, and it will feel like sometimes you may expect that professional to have a lot of knowledge and experience, but it's really important to prepare for that anyway, to try and build a picture and build a story about what the young person's life looks like on a day-to-day basis, and that is everything from basic skills, the sort of social side of their life, the support they need. So the preparation is key in thinking, because sometimes as a parent carer, you're so used to the support you're providing, sometimes it doesn't always come at the forefront of your mind sometimes, because you're so used to that. So it's trying to sort of take a step back and prepare very well, so you can give that professional a sort of true picture of day to day, of the good things, the things the young person struggles with, what you as a family need to do, what your support looks like every day. That preparation will be key, because what we do see, unfortunately, is misinterpretation, or the professional not quite understanding what that looks like, and then they go away with a picture that's not quite correct. So you've kind of got to put them in as best as you can into your shoes, if that makes sense. And so that preparation is definitely key, and from the first meeting, because otherwise, without that, they'll take away perhaps a different, totally different perspective sometimes on what life actually is for the young person. I would summarize
Karen,
that, but yeah.
Karen, what's your experience been about sort of bringing the local authority back in this way? Have you brought the local authority back in this way, or
Yes. Yeah.
yes?
Yeah.
And
So
how did they respond to that?
yeah, I mean, initially we had a social care assessment that was done in our appeal to get the place at Swaycliffe, and actually we had a locum social worker do that, and maybe we were just lucky on that day, because actually she wasn't then kind of tied to the local authorities' kind of ethos and ways of working, which worked really well. When we had a reassessment, again, we've been lucky with the choice of social worker, but actually one of the things that we made sure of, and Rachel, you kind of might want to expand on this, is actually we know that many of the assessments under Section 17 are done under the working together guidance, which was the safeguarding kind of standard ways of working for social care, which followed after the Victoria Columbier inquiry. Am I right in that? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we did before the reassessment took place, actually, we had a conversation with our social worker, and obviously we couldn't say to her that obviously if you see something horrendous, then you have a duty, obviously, but we didn't want the assessment to proceed with a safeguarding lens, that it should proceed with a disability lens. And I wonder whether you wanted to say something about that.
That is a very, very common issue, an issue that, yeah, we're actually behind the scenes working with courts on, which sounds a bit scary, as I can imagine, and MPs as well, because the assessment, the Section 17 assessment, alongside the working together. So if you Google working together, it'll give you a policy essentially about what's involved in that. And the problem that we have is that, yes, when we have social workers assessing under the Section 17, they are exactly what you say, Karen. They're looking through a safeguarding lens. You could have the most gold standard assessment, the most experienced social worker perhaps, but if you haven't got the right social worker sitting behind the best gold star assessment tool, it's challenging. So that is something we're working on needing to change. So yeah, it's all from a sort of safeguarding perspective. So they're not thinking, for example, it can be quite tricky. So if you've got, say, a social worker who was looking at it through a safeguarding lens, and you've got another social worker who's looking at it who's thinking about things like social activities, but looking at the sensory profile of the young person within that as well. And that's what we're missing in how generally social work assessments are done. Because actually, recently, a judge did say to me to have two assessments done by a local authority social worker and a neurodivergent social worker. It's under the same piece of legislation, but looked entirely different. So it's the same process, the same legislation, but couldn't have been any different. Well, it's completely different. So that is a problem. So that is also a really good point to be mindful again with our preparation from the start, because what they're going through is an assessment tool, which is obviously developed by social care legislation. So, for example, if they were talking about activities that young person's done, they're going to, or do generally day to day, that they may be thinking of whether as a parent carer, are you providing that stimulation of activities for a young person, where a social worker who's thinking about the aspects of neurodiversity, I'd be thinking then about, okay, what's the sensory profile of that young person in terms of linking that to activities like higher movement based activities and regulation needs. And of course, that's where we find it tricky when we see the safeguarding lens assessment, because they don't take an awful lot of that well, hardly at all into consideration. So that's a big, massive need for change. We did think it was going to be reviewed, but unfortunately, we're still in the same boat. So that would be a key aspect of your preparation as well, is to have a look at Section 17, and have a look at the Common Assessment Framework. So if you put that into Google, go through the Common Assessment Framework, and it'll give you different sections of this piece of legislation. And within each section, think if your young person's, it could be, I keep referring to sensory needs, but because it's a big aspect of what it should be a big aspect of the social care needs and support needs of a young person. But to go through all those sections and think about your young person's needs that arise as part of their disability within that, because as they're looking through a safeguarding lens, they are not going to often think naturally about those other wider aspects as well. I'm trying to think of an example. So part of the Common Assessment Framework is looking at a young person's nutrition needs, for example. So I'd be looking at, for your young person's perhaps challenges with different types of foods and smells, taking all those basic, to us is basic, isn't it? 'Cause it's day to day, but all those aspects into consideration as well. So yeah, that's a really good one to go through the Common Assessment Framework first as part of your preparation, and link your child's needs or young person's needs under each section. It sounds like a lot of work, but it'll be worth it, because when we're having professionals with that safeguarding lens, sometimes we have to do that key preparation to make sure that we're not on a different pathway, essentially, in terms of thinking with the professional.
I've got one last question, Chris, if that's okay, which is about lower school to higher school. So as a result of social care support, I just wanted to say that our son gets 9 hours of support a week in the holidays. And so he's had a key worker for the past 2 years who, takes him out. It can either do it in it's a one long day or a couple of 4.5 hour sessions. And it has been amazing. It's been amazing to support the types of things that the independence team do in school and school do in terms of the independence journey, and to keep that going in the holidays. It has been remarkable. And it's also made a big difference to our son returning to school in September in respect of mental health too. There's been a much smoother transition back to school because he's had support in the holidays. So my last question, Rachel, was about I know that kind of with the changes now in SEND, the kind of the push for local authorities, because SEND budgets, at the moment due to be called in March 2026, right? Lots of local authorities are looking at how they can not pay for expensive placements anymore, and the kind of the movement from 16 to post 16 is, we're seeing quite a lot of challenges there with kind of placements that were kind of ongoing and then they get disrupted. So I wonder if you could talk to the parents about the benefit of social care evidence in kind of providing the essential evidence for a placement like Swaycliffe, kind of being all in the round. So it's not just education, but actually evidence as part of the independence kind of framework.
Yes, okay. Yeah, definitely. So what's the importance of evidence is to be thinking about anyway is, for example, 16, so say someone was in where you are now, in terms of then thinking about generalizing skills across different environments. Because life experiences as they get older obviously are going to look a little bit different. So it's that transitional element as well. In terms of sort of the aspects around evidence, really, it's to be thinking of like a pathway, really. So we're looking at what their needs are now, where they need support in terms of where they want to get to, and the families should be absolutely key part of that. As parent carers, key part of that process. What we're often seeing is that there is a lot of challenges in the SEND world, essentially, regarding the types of provisions that are available and the financial challenges with local authorities as well. So I think it's probably harder than ever, more difficult than ever in terms of securing the right provisions. So what's really very important there is that hopefully you won't need to access independent support from whether that's an occupational therapist, educational psychologist, independent social worker. But if you are struggling, we know our young people, don't we? We know our children, and we know what works well, and we know what they need. And if we're really struggling with that, then yes, obviously Karen mentioned the tribunal process earlier. It's not easy. It's quite stressful, isn't it, Karen? And it's very long and a lot of work as well. But looking at if you do need that support, the most two important areas, if you're looking at a provision in education, perhaps part residential and part education, for example, you would need to be looking at an educational psychologist support and an independent social worker. So if you're looking at residential and education college, for example, so it's being very, very, I guess, on the ball really, and because things are a lot more challenging now and getting those provisions that we know our young people need. but it's a huge important time, isn't it? Especially the closer to 18 they get as well. So it really needs to start that sort of process really, and looking at their needs and the provision, thinking about what after 18, how are things looking now, and realistically, what is that going to look like provisions wise? What is the pathway that we need? And it's having that planning from now. For us parent carers, and it is an awful lot of work. It is an awful lot of work, but for good reason, obviously, to make sure they're on the right journey. Any more questions, Karen, or anyone?
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Absolutely, Steve.
Section 17, I'm actually at this point now where I've got
Right.
15 going on to 16, and I'm conscious of where I've got twins and both are autistic. One are high functioning and one's low functioning. Power of attorney, and there is, I've forgotten what the other one is, where it's a lifetime or something, where if the child develops into an adult, you can actually give up your rights to protect them. I've forgotten what it's called now. But would you be able to use a Section 17 report to apply for power of attorney, or this life term thing? I've forgotten what it's called.
No, so it won't. So it's a mental capacity assessment. So if you've got concerns regarding if it's to do with, so you've got two areas. So you've got appointee or deputy over financial aspects of the young person's life, and you've also got the welfare aspect. So it's regarding, so they would need a mental capacity assessment. So if there's doubts, for example, in regards to a young person's ability to make decisions on finances, we'll say, a capacity assessment would have to be instructed to, it's essentially, it is a test essentially, to see if the young person can make a decision on finances and manage finances. And if that mental capacity assessment concludes that that young person cannot do that, then it's what's in the young person's best interest, which is usually a parent carer who, if willing, would make an application to be your deputy for that young person's finances. Similar applies then to welfare. So if there's concerns of that young person's ability or capacity to make decisions on their care and support or where they live, those mental capacity assessments can be done if there's doubts around their ability to do that. Although there is a big challenge with welfare deputies, and that courts do not like to approve welfare deputies because they're highly restrictive. And what I've got children here as well in the background. Sorry. So, in terms of the welfare deputy, there's something called the Mental Capacity Act. So every vulnerable person who there's concerns around their capacity, they are protected by law by the Mental Capacity Act. So the reason why judges do not like to give authorization for welfare deputies, for parents to be welfare deputies, is because that piece of legislation is already there. So the local authority have to abide by that. If that young person or adult, 16 and over, this is for, does not have capacity, for example, to make decisions around their care and support or living arrangements, it then has to go under something, the local authority and the family have to use something called the best interest process decision making underneath the Mental Capacity Act legislation. And that is what protects our young people and our adults, children as well. So I hope that explains, Steve. It's a complex
No, it does.
area.
It goes further than that. Is that being an older parent, I'm conscious of who will take that responsibility later on in life for them.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you trust your older children? Do you relatives? It's a very vast area that people don't exploit children.
Yes.
or young adults, and I have major concerns about this area.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, Steve, it's probably, sorry, as a parent carer, one of our biggest fears, I'd say. In terms of what happens after our time, it's very tricky. If, for example, if you've got other children, and they're comfortable with that, you're comfortable with that, and obviously, yes, if they were a deputy for someone, let's just say a brother, a sibling was a deputy for their sibling with a disability for finances, they have a lot of sort of duties as a deputy that will be checked annually by the court themselves. It's like an application process, something the deputy themselves signs up to. They have to provide reports. The aspects of the deputyship, then the application, they would be annually checking whether that deputy is safely acting in that person's best interests. But yeah, that's I think probably one of the most tricky parts for parent carers, isn't it? In terms of who does that after my time, who is the best person to do that. Any sort of if that isn't an option to families, then the best advice I would suggest would be to contact a solicitor then who works in this area, and there's lots of solicitors that do work. So any court of protection solicitors was what I'd be Googling essentially, to look at an alternative plan. Sorry, look at an alternative plan when family members are not available to do that role.
Yeah, thank you. Get another question?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I have struggled with social services, and you were very diplomatic in how you describe them. I would describe them as incompetent. But is there a way that an independent social worker could sort of work with you to get to the point where they would help you with a Section 17, or could independent do a Section 17, or does it have to be the local authority?
So yes, independent social workers can do a Section 17, yeah. So we work under the same legislation. The issue then, though, is that it's not a statutory assessment. So it's basically, for example, if a local authority has completed a Section 17 assessment themselves, then an independent social worker comes in because they've got concerns, you've got concerns, and they dispute what's in that. It's very evidence-based as well. Then that's obviously then an argument that you have in terms of the evidence as to why whatever is being proposed, if you know that's not right for your young person, yeah, you can use it for that. But it's not a statutory assessment, but it is completed under the same legislation, if that makes sense. Does that make sense, Steve? Yeah.
I could ask loads of questions here.
You carry on.
You can challenge what the local authority prepares or puts for the report. So is that tribunal, mediation?
We don't always get to tribunal or mediation. I think if you've got the evidence there and you're putting that in, they can see from that evidence that they're going to have a tricky time, because the difference is obviously they are overrun with lack of resources and not much support, not a lot of understanding of our young people, in all honesty. So it's very difficult. Your whatever independent expert it is, as long as they've got the experience, then it'll give you the evidence you need, basically. But again, the right experience as well.
To ask for a Section 17, you said, can I just write, or do I have to stir something up?
Usually there's on your local authority's website, there is normally a section on there where it depends on the young person's age. If it's child, young person, it would still come under children's services, yeah. But then they won't automatically sort of arrange an assessment with a child disability team or a young person's disability team, which is a problem that Karen spoke about earlier in a sense as well. And that's another problem. But yeah, you can do it on the website. You can make a referral, self-referral on the website.
Okay. If the children's services say they are arranging for the transition to adult services, what does that actually mean?
It means that, so even though they come under the same local authority, it's different departments essentially.
Oh.
So you've got obviously your children's departments and your adult department. So, for example, if a young person was receiving a care package under children's services, that budget, it's all really just about budgets, would transfer over to the adults team. And the adults assessment of need and care and support needs would look a little bit different because the law changes basically from 18 and over, apart from the Mental Capacity Act, which is 16 plus.
Okay. I'll leave it there, thanks. This has been really helpful. Right sort of time for me.
That's good, Steve. Pleased to hear that. That's great. And thanks for those questions. I'm sure they'll be of interest to other people as well. Bani, do you have a question?
Thank you very much, Rachel. It's really interesting. And also thanks, Karen and Steve, because your questions are really interesting as well. Thank you. I don't really know very much at all about social care. And I have to be honest, it never even occurred to me when Casper's at 13 and he's had an EHCP since he was 2.5. So it's always been the education element, so not health and not, health we had a tiny bit because he has restricted eating habits consistent with his autism, but which have got much better over time. But it never really occurred to Nick or I about social care. So I'd just be very grateful, please, if, but I do think, having listened to what Karen was saying, that Frankie benefited from, I think, because our situation is Nick's family mainly live in Scotland and my brother's in Nottingham. Both my parents, who are from Oxfordshire, are sadly passed away. So we're very limited, and I work full time. We're quite limited, and also because of Casper's challenges. COVID, for example, where a lot of people were saying, gosh, we're so isolated. Actually, that was kind of our normal because we are very isolated generally. And what we do is we've kind of fallen into this mindset, which the local authority are aware of and have encouraged, which is, put your best foot forward and just do everything yourselves. And I think the local authority think we're a great family because we try everything out. We do everything that we possibly can to support Casper. We try literally every activity that there is going, and we just do our best and keep doing our best. But eventually you get to a point where your family life does become like a therapy room, and an autism therapy room, and there's got to be a bit more balance. And also for Casper, it's very important that he weans himself off his parents as carers and starts to trust other adults in the community, because it's only if he starts doing that in a graduated way that he will be able to understand about who to trust, who not to trust, what a safe adult looks like, and to picture and visualize that. So we have started, for example, even though Nick's been saying, I'll do the driving, I've sort of been quite firm and said, no, we're going to actually get school transport, because it's been offered to us many times and we've said no, to be diffident. And I just thought, no, actually, we will take it up. So we've taken it up, and that's been great. So I suppose what I'm now wondering is, for the next kind of level, what would social care typically look like when it's not arriving at our threshold of our front door from a safeguarding perspective? Because obviously I have to admit, in my mind, I always thought of it as a safeguarding thing, and it never occurred to me that it would be from a disability lens. So what could you maybe just sort of draw out for a 13-year-old boy who hasn't got any siblings, what that might look like in terms of provision?
Okay, so it's very, I mean, it's very individualized. So in terms of, they would be looking at independence is one of the main focused areas for social workers, especially so if you're a social worker from example, say a child disability team or a transition team, they would be looking precisely at the independence need, sort of where the young person child is, and thinking about what they could do to help with their independence. So, for example, when this comes up an awful lot, is one of a lot of discussions around extending relationships is what I talk about quite a lot. And the reason behind that is for situations, lots of families are in the same position that that you're in as well, in terms of the extensions of relationships is a massive part, isn't it? In getting older, because they, they will be they are very reliant, aren't they, on us. And we know that deep down we do have a lot of the worries about, can anyone else support them in the same way? And like you said, getting used to other people. So gradually building in things like, for example, recently I did an assessment for a young person who's like very similar to what Karen spoke about, with like a PA, and I support a couple of hours a week and doing sort of interest-led activities with the young person. And that sort of the remit for social care for doing that is because the young person needed to extend relationships with other people, because mum and dad were all that he knew. And as he gets older, naturally he's going to be needing to experience different places, different people, being able to co-regulate essentially with other people, not just mum and dad. And that was a need in itself. So what the law looks at is, what is the young person's needs and are they unmet? Now in this case, which is very, very similar situation, that the need was there, but of course it's unmet because there's no other members. They will look to family first. They will look to friends of family even. What resources do the family already have for some alternative adults to support that young person? But very often that's not there for us, is it? And so, like this young person, he now has a support worker. Sometimes they're called a PA as well, where a direct payment is offered to families, so they can use that fund to employ their own support staff. And that could be anything from a couple of hours a week to more than that. It really depends on the child's needs, and also your needs as well, in terms of, are you, as a parent carer, are you getting some downtime, essentially some respite? And that comes under the legislation as well as something they need to consider. So as a carer, you have rights in your own right as a carer for something else as well, which is a carer's assessment. And that carer's assessment, if you need that respite, that assessment is in itself, you're in your own right. So it could be that you need a couple of hours a week as well, and they'd need to look at that to provide some respite support. And the young person may need, it just depends in terms of hours, say 5 hours a week to do some social opportunities with a PA and support worker. So yeah, they're two important aspects to think about, definitely, and really important, as we know.
Can I just ask another quick question, please, following on from that?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that it would be a child disability team that would do that assessment under Section 17. Is that child disability is within social services or within the SEN team for education? Sorry, that's
Yeah, typically it wouldn't come under education, so they have a separate social care department. And the referral goes to generic children's services, first of all, and it can be a bit of a fight for parents to request a children's disability related team. My preference would be in terms of knowing the social services side of things and the young person, would be that there's probably more chance of having a professional within a child disability team that would you hopefully have a better assessment with and would have more understanding, but it's not an automatic process. So you
is that a
do.
different team to social services and the education team? Is that a unique team then that sits on its own child disability team?
You'd have an education department and you'd have a social care department. They're two separate departments, yes. They do work together, they're supposed to work together, but they are two different departments, but they should be liaising with each other.
Child disability team sits in which department? For
Children's social care.
They're in the social care.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So could you perhaps say to your SEN officer, because obviously each child has a SEN officer for education, could you say to them, please, could you, I'm thinking of a Section 17 assessment, could you please refer this to whoever in social care is familiar with disability?
Yeah, you've got two options.
Yeah,
you've got, I would share that, like what you've just shared with us, really, in that you are a little bit concerned about their ability in terms of the social aspects, and it could be sort of things like summer holidays and things, which often comes up as a challenge. It needing some more of the, a routine through summer holidays and things as well. So yeah, you could either ask them to refer, or you can self-refer as well. You can do that either way.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks, you very
Rachel.
much.
Thanks, Barney. Beth?
Thanks, Chris. Rachel, I'm very sorry. I'm not being rude. IT's beating me. I can't get my video on. I'm sorry. I just wanted to check, please. You said near the start that generally when you do the Section 17, that the LA should look at it from the age of 14, really. I'm just asking because my son is only a few months off being 14. So when you say they should look at it, with my cynical hat on here, is that they should look at it, but there's too much demand and basically they prioritise from 16? Or actually, do I try my luck? Do I get stubborn and do I do it anyway?
Yeah, well, in the SEN policies, which I'm going to confuse everyone now, which is in education, transition is supposed to start at 14. But I very rarely see that happening, in all honesty. But it should happen.
So do you think it is worth and actually trying to start that?
They should be, yeah. They should be starting to think about what I'll do if I'll send it to Karen what I'm referring to, and I'll ask if Karen probably knows what I'm referring to. And then I will send that then, because that would be one you could read beforehand to put your argument together, essentially, to be able to ask for that. But yeah, it should happen at 14, definitely. But really does.
Brilliant. Okay, and just to say thanks again for tonight. It's been really useful. Thank you.
No problem. I'm just putting my charger in, sorry.
Thanks, Beth. Karen, I might come to you for the final question. I think it sounds like there's some young people might need their mum back in a minute. So
yeah,
that's okay.
I just wanted actually to pick up on a point you made, Benny, because actually this was something that we were very driven by in respect to the social care support that we were seeking, which was actually it wasn't right for Franco that going into 15, 16 and beyond and kind of 17 that he always went out with his parents, because if he was a neurotypical young person he wouldn't be doing that. And therefore it was this aspect of, exactly as you just said, Rachel, him being able to navigate a community that extended beyond us. And so that's kind of why we kind of fought to get the social care support. But I just wanted to say a couple of things about the types of things that the support worker does with Franco to kind of give you an idea. So Damien, that's his support worker, has been working on independent travel. So about last summer, the support worker worked with Franco on making a train journey on his own, which he did for the first time, like when he was 17 and a half. Like most neurotypical kids have jumped on a train at like 13. He did 2 stops from us up to Birmingham, and Damien met him and then put him on the train again. So that was a big milestone for Franco, actually going on a train on his own. And we've been really working up to independent travel. And actually, Franco's now traveling home from school on a Friday on the train. It's been remarkable, right? The key worker's also been working with him on kind of money management and how you go into the community and manage your money, but also how you go into a shop and buy things and ask for things, how you navigate things that you don't get first choice in a restaurant, right, if they run out. So all those little things that we probably take for granted that I know school do heaps on as well, but actually in the holidays we wanted that to continue and that support, so it was kind of seamless. So hopefully that kind of gives you, Bunny, some of the kind of things that the key worker's been doing with Franco, little things that kind of we take for granted every day, but actually for Franco's independence have been huge.
I think it's also the case that Damien's liaised with school, so
yeah,
they're on the same sheet basically
with Franco's key worker.
Yeah.
So
and it's great that we can get school mirrored in that way with Damien.
And it's that generalization as well, isn't it? Generalizing skills from your safe environment to obviously expanding those skills in different unpredictable environments like the community. Definitely.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks again, Rachel. I think that's a nice way just to sort of bring the Family Forum to an end. I think that, Rachel, thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
This evening. It's been, your level of knowledge, the clarity of your answers has been fantastic. I think everyone who's here has benefited from it. We've recorded it and we'll share that with the families as well. So yeah, thank you. Rob, is there anything you want to add?
No, just Rachel, are you available if people wanted to contact you for independent advice or things like that? Are you available to parents, and we could pass on those contact details if people wanted pieces of work done or anything like that? That'd be something they could.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also if particular subjects or common themes of worries come up as well, I'm happy to come to family forums as well. It's absolutely fine.
Rachel, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for their input, and thank you to Karen for bringing us together with Rachel. That's been fantastic.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks, Rachel.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone. Thank you. Have a nice
Bye.
evening.
And you,
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.